Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Tom.
Hi, I'm Stephanie.
It's our News Watch unit for the month of March, and it's also our all-English unit, so we don't have a Chinese teacher today. We've done this because our Chinese teacher has been working very, very hard, and the teacher has decided to take a day off to rest, so therefore we're kind of stuck with doing this totally in English. I'm actually kidding. Of course, this is a planned unit for the month. We have one of these every month, and it's a news unit, so we're going to talk about a couple of news items here. One is about a flying taxi, and another one is about protesters trying to ruin art in order to stop people from using oil so much. So we'll get into this right now. We'll read the entire contents of our lesson, and then we'll talk about it. Last November, an electric helicopter belonging to German company Volocopter successfully completed a test flight above an airport outside Paris. While a pilot was on board to accompany the passenger and control the vehicle, the test flight demonstrated the possibilities of unmanned commercial flights. A number of companies are vying to be the first to have their flying taxis certified by regulators. The two-seater Volocopter has 8 rotors and resembles a massive drone. It's intended for use in urban environments as its limited battery capacity restricts it from taking long flights. In addition, as an electric vehicle, it's free from carbon emissions and thus better for city environments. Volocopter and its rivals will have to overcome several challenges to officially get their vehicles up in the air. These include building the necessary infrastructure of landing sites and charging stations, as well as convincing the public their flying taxis are safe. However, Volocopter has confidence in its vehicle and aims to have it in operation for the 2024 Olympic Games in Paris.
Environmental group attacks art to raise awareness. A number of controversial attacks on artworks made headlines last year as the environmental group Just Stop Oil undertook a series of protests. Activists threw tomato soup on Vincent van Gogh's famous Sunflowers painting in London's National Gallery. Fortunately, there was no lasting damage thanks to a protective frame, which was cleaned. The same can't be said for Van Gogh's Peach Trees in Blossom. 2 activists glued themselves to the frame, which was permanently damaged. Both sets of protesters were arrested for criminal damage, and in the latter case, they were found guilty. Just Stop Oil describes itself as a collection of environmentalist groups that wants to stop the British government from granting licenses to oil and gas projects. It wants to see an end to fossil fuel use, as well as more investment in renewable energy sources. Just Stop Oil is targeting famous art so that its protests take place on a public stage. However, the group's critics say its protests are disrupting people's lives and won't win them any support.
All right, everybody, let's dive right in and talk about the contents of today's lesson. Again, it's our News Watch unit for the month of March. The first story is about flying taxis. I'm sure most of us have thought about having a flying car so that we can get around traffic and we don't get stuck in traffic jams and things like that. I think most of us have fantasized. Yeah, I want to fly away. I want to get away. I want to get in a car and fly away. It would be nice to have a private car, but we're going to start first with taxis. And there has been a test flight in Paris, which took place some time ago, and it was conducted by a German company. So let's get into this. It said last November, an electric helicopter belonging to German company Volocopter successfully completed a test flight above an airport outside Paris. A helicopter, of course, is a kind of aircraft that can hover in the air because it's got those rotors that spin in circles and it goes up into the air. And, of course, the police use them all the time.
Yeah, I don't know about you, Tom, but going up in the air, just as, some sort of I guess, passenger in a taxi like this would scare me to death. I think the roads are dangerous enough. I can't imagine trying to go through the air in some of these, especially because we don't have a lot of control over these vehicles that are being rolled out, like, the cars that drive themselves. They're having some problems with those. So I'm going to wait until they get the kinks or the problems worked out. Sometimes we call problems kinks in something. So, yeah, these flying taxis are taking test flights in Paris. So if you live in Paris or you're close to Paris or you're planning on going on a trip there, watch out. Be aware that this is going on because accidents do happen, especially when new technology is being rolled out and it still has a lot of imperfections in it, can you say? So this Volocopter successfully completed a test flight, and they did it above an airport outside Paris. There was a pilot who was brave enough to be on board, and the pilot accompanied the passenger, and the pilot was in control of the vehicle, which is this Volocopter. And the test flight demonstrated the possibilities of unmanned commercial flights. If you demonstrate something, you show somebody something. I think one of the best examples of demonstrating stuff would be at these big superstores like Costco or big supermarkets where they have people who are demonstrating different types of foods. They're giving you a little sample, or maybe there's a new vacuum cleaner or mattress for sale, and they're going to have people there to demonstrate how great these products are to sell more of them.
Right, and when they do that, it's called giving you a demonstration. But in this particular case, this test flight shows us or demonstrates that we have these possibilities for unmanned commercial flights. If something's unmanned, it's controlled remotely, just like the brown line here in Taipei and the yellow line in Taipei. Actually, that's out in Taipei-Xian, I believe. Or no, not Taipei-Xian, Xinbei-Shi.
Oh, so the brown line's unmanned, huh? I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's not. There's nobody driving the train.
There's no engineer.
Right, there's nobody in the train, but there are people in the other trains, but not on the yellow line and the brown line.
Huh.
So I guess you could say they're unmanned. This word has the word man in it, and there might be a problem with that because man means male, but I'm not going to use the word unpersoned. That is stupid. That's silly. It's moronic. It's idiotic. I'm not going to do that. It sounds so dumb. We're just going to go with unmanned here. And these are commercial flights, which means they're flights that people take and they pay money for that transportation.
Yeah. So a number of companies are vying to be the first to have their flying taxis certified by regulators. If you vie for something, it just means you're competing for something. Maybe you've been in line and you're kind of trying to make your position known to the people in front and behind you. I've had people try to cut in line.
Oh, no.
Here. Yeah. So they're they're vying with me to have a better position in line. Maybe you're in line to buy tickets and people want to be the first ones to get those tickets, so they will kind of compete. And that's what that word means, compete. They're competing to be the first to have their flying taxis certified by regulators. To certify just means there's some sort of standards that the government or some authority figure has put out there, and you have to pass them. And once you pass them and show them that you are following all the rules or that you've standardized your product, they give you certification, which means you can go ahead and do business.
So let's describe this vehicle. It says the two-seater Volocopter has 8 rotors and resembles a massive drone.
Huh.
A drone, of course, is a kind of remote-controlled helicopter, I guess you could say, that a lot of people here in Taiwan have. They have cameras on them. You can film things like flying over Ximending or something like that.
Yeah, they use them for films now. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know if that's legal to do that, but
I don't know.
You probably have to check the regulations. That's what a drone is, and it's intended for use in urban environments, as its limited battery capacity restricts it from taking long flights. So again, it's got 8 rotors, which are the blades that spin around like on a helicopter. It's got rotors. And in addition, as an electric vehicle, it's free from carbon emissions and thus better for city environments. So here we've got an emission, which means something that comes out of something, usually in the form of a gas. Like if you ride a scooter, of course, you're supposed to have your emissions checked every once in a while, maybe every year, I think.
Yeah, when I was growing up and we had cars, and I had a car when I was young, I would have to go get my emissions checked. If you have an older car, usually the exhaust, that kind of smoke that comes out from your engine, if your car was kind of old, that smoke was dirty. So they wanted to get those cars off the road because the emissions were really polluting the air. So this particular electric vehicle is free from carbon emissions and thus better for city environments, better for our air and air quality here. Volocopter and its rivals, those are the competing companies, its competitors, who are also trying to get their helicopters out there. They are working to overcome several challenges so that they can officially get their vehicles up in the air. As you can see, they haven't quite yet managed to satisfy regulators. I think it's because they're still not very safe. So some of these things that they're trying to overcome, the challenges include building the necessary infrastructure of landing sites and charging stations. We're finding this with electric cars. People are buying electric cars, but there are not enough charging stations, and so they're kind of stuck when they can't get their vehicle charged up and they can't move. So we've got infrastructure that has to be put in place before some of these wild ideas can even be considered seriously.
Yep, infrastructure refers to buildings and facilities and things like that a society needs to function.
Roads,
bridges, power sources and stuff like that. So the infrastructure for these would require landing sites and charging stations. Just like we have this infrastructure for Gogoro scooters, where they can go to charging stations and change the battery and stuff like that. That's part of that infrastructure. And also, we need to convince the public their flying taxis are safe. Okay, so people are going to be wary of flying in those things, especially in regard to what happened to Kobe Bryant and his daughter. You know, I'm not sure a lot of people want to go up in helicopters after that. However, Volocopter has confidence in its vehicle and aims to have it in operation for the 2024 Olympic Games in Paris. Confidence is a belief in yourself that you can do something well, or a belief in your company or whatever. I have confidence that our new product is going to sell well. I don't have any doubts at all.
Yeah, you can have self-confidence. That's a belief in yourself that you can do something, that you have the capabilities, you have the intellect needed. Or it can be confidence in somebody else, or here it's confidence in their vehicle that they are making. And they have a goal here to have it in operation for the 2024 Olympic Games. Good luck to them. Guys, we're going to take a quick break. We're not going to listen to our Chinese teacher, but we will be back with our next story.
Welcome back, everybody. We're now going to continue with our second featured news story for this month's News Watch unit. The first unit today was about flying taxis. They did a test flight in Paris, and I guess it was successful, but of course they've got lots of challenges to get this thing off the ground. But they're confident they can do it by the time the 2024 Olympics roll around. Now, our second story for today is about these protesters attacking art to raise awareness about the consumption of petroleum in the world. And we can tell you what our opinions on that as our lesson, or what our opinions are regarding their protests as our lesson continues. But first of all, let's tell you exactly what happened. A number of controversial attacks on artworks made headlines last year as the environmental group Just Stop Oil undertook a series of protests. So, of course, we got protests. That's when people protest against the government or against whoever for doing something. You just say you don't like it and you want change. Protests are quite common in Taipei here because the government is here, so people come here to protest government policy regarding pensions or regarding farming policies or things like that. And the verb is supposed to be protest, but most people pronounce both the noun and the verb protest.
Yeah, these were some controversial attacks, meaning there were different opinions about the attacks from the public. Some people supported the attacks and others did not support them. I think you could say the majority of people did not support the attacks on artworks that are considered to be treasures and beloved by people. There's certainly part of our culture. So people were kind of upset that these young kids, and they were, I would say they're in their 20s, went and were attacking some of these artworks. So they undertook a series of protests. Their group is called Just Stop Oil, and undertook is the past tense form of the verb undertake. To undertake something means to start it, to take the task upon yourself. You're going to attempt something. You can undertake a new type of exercise routine. You can undertake a new job. You can undertake different things. Here we're using it to talk about their attempt to do something. So they undertook a series of protests, not just one, but one and then another one and another one. It seemed to come up every couple days that there was a new protest where they actually tried to damage these priceless works of art.
Yep, they planned these protests and they carried them out. And, of course, these are a series of protests, and they didn't have just one, but they did several of them. Here's what happened. In one case, the activists threw tomato soup on Vincent van Gogh's famous Sunflowers painting in London's National Gallery. So this is what they did. They threw tomato soup at this particular painting. And that's a famous painting by Vincent van Gogh. I think you're supposed to say Gogh or something like that if you're speaking.
If you're Dutch, yeah.
If you're Dutch or if you're in England, I don't think they say it the way the Americans do. But we Yankees say Vincent van Gogh. And, of course, one of his famous paintings is called Sunflowers, and it hangs in the National Gallery in London.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very famous. I'm sure our listeners are familiar with it. Fortunately, there was no lasting damage thanks to a protective frame which was cleaned. So the artwork that's on the walls doesn't just... It's not just bared to the public. It's not the canvas in front of you. Usually there's a piece of glass in front of the paintings, the canvas to protect them. And thank goodness it was there because the tomato soup would have ruined it. So there was no damage thanks to the protective frame. Here we're just talking about the frame that goes around the painting, and it was able to be cleaned. The same can't be said for the other protests. This one happened again. Poor Vincent van Gogh. He was chosen. He had a painting named Peach Trees in Blossom. And this time there were two young activists who glued themselves to the frame. There's something called, what do you call that glue? Super glue.
Super glue, yeah.
Super glue. And when it came out, we were amazed. I remember it was years ago that it first came on the market. And wow, just a little tiny bit, and it could glue anything shut. I used to use it on my fingernails. If I broke a nail, I would use that. It was awesome. And you can glue your skin to something, and it hurts if you try to pull it away. Well, these two activists were pretty stupid. They glued themselves to the frame, and that particular museum just turned off the lights that night and left them the whole night in the museum. No one rescued them at first because they were so stupid. So they kind of deserved that. These two protesters were actually arrested and charged and found guilty. If you're going to do damage to something like this, you probably don't want to stay at the scene of the crime. Obviously, it's going to be easy to arrest you if you've glued yourself to your scene of crime or your crime scene.
It looks like that particular tactic did not work. I think it probably encouraged people to use more oil just to say you guys did something really bad there, so you better learn your lesson and not try to do something like that again.
So dumb.
But again, they glued themselves to the frame. A picture, a photograph, or a painting sometimes has a frame on it, which is something around the outside. And that's usually considered part of the artwork. And in this particular case, the frame has been ruined, but the painting, I think, is okay. Maybe they could put a new frame on it or something like that.
They had to reframe it.
They probably did. Okay, so both sets of protesters were arrested for criminal damage. And then later on, in the latter case, when they went to court, they were found guilty, and they were probably punished for that.
I hope so.
I hope so too, but here in the next paragraph it says, Just Stop Oil describes itself as a collection of environmentalist groups that wants to stop the British government from granting licenses to oil and gas projects. Now, here it says it's a collection of these environmentalist groups, and that collection wants to stop the British government from giving licenses to various oil and gas projects. So again, it's weird that the subject of this sentence is actually collection. So the collection wants to stop the British government from doing something in this particular case. So what they want to stop the British government from doing is to grant licenses to oil and gas projects. So a license is permission to do something. Of course, if you want to drive a car, you need to have a license. And then, of course, various companies and organizations need licenses to conduct business. If they conduct business without a license, they could get in big trouble. And they want to stop them from getting licenses for oil and gas projects, which would mean drilling for oil, maybe in the North Sea or in different areas.
Yeah, so we've got oil and gas that companies go and try to find. You have to explore and drill for that. It's not always easy to find. But they want to stop that. They feel like if they put an end to the use of oil and gas, it will make our world perfect in utopia. But, you know, we need oil and gas to survive. Our whole way of life is built on oil and gas, and we need it. Otherwise, people will starve, and people won't have enough fuel to heat their homes. We found that to be the case in Europe this winter. A lot of people were very, very cold because they couldn't afford to pay for the fuel that had shot up in price. So it wants to see an end to fossil fuel use, as well as more investment in renewable energy sources. If you invest in something, you take your own money and you put it into a project where you hope that will be very successful, will return your money that you've invested plus interest. So hopefully more people will be investing in renewable energy sources. So far, the wind energy and the is not producing enough for us, obviously. So we'll just have to keep working at it. But in the meantime, we can't just stop oil. We need our oil and gas to live.
Exactly. Of course, they have the right to protest, but maybe that's going a little bit too far, and they're probably going to hurt their cause by doing something like that.
Yeah, you don't want to damage anything when you're protesting or hurt people.
Exactly. So, yeah, especially something as sacred as works of art by Vincent van Gogh.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what he had to do with oil exploration or anything like that.
I don't think they liked him. I think that's why they chose him. It's crazy.
Yeah, they probably thought that trying to cut off your ear has something to do with drilling for oil, so they wanted to protest that. I don't know.
Who knows?
But in any case, again, this is a collection or it's an organization. So Just Stop Oil is targeting famous art so that its protests take place on a public stage. So they think that by attacking works of famous art in public places, they'll get more attention that way, and they want to do it on a public stage. I don't know if they have any other options, like renting an auditorium or something like that, or having a protest on the steps of City Hall or something like that. It seems to me that they would have those opportunities. I'm not quite sure why they need to go into museums.
I think they need attention. The kids that were arrested for this, at least, were found out to be very, very wealthy. They're from wealthy families. They don't have jobs. They don't need to work because they have parents who have just given them money as inheritances. So they have time to go and make trouble while the rest of us are trying to just make a living. Yeah, if they want to protest, that's fine, but don't damage other people's property and don't make life harder for people. And that's what they were doing. A lot of them decided to sit in the middle of the road and protest that way. Well, it prohibited people from, going back and forth to work. Ambulances couldn't get through. They made a lot of people in the UK angry.
So if you really want to bring about change, you should think about the impression you're going to give to people.
Your method, yeah.
But, I would say most people think that this went a little bit too far.
Yeah.
I'd be curious as to how our students feel about this, or perhaps other related protests that have taken place here in Taiwan. I don't know if they have extreme protests here in Taiwan so much, but you never know. There might be some protests that went a little overboard.
Have you ever protested here?
Not here, no. I've pretty much, I'm not really too much into politics and things like that, so I really don't know what the government is doing or what people want, so I just kind of stay on the sidelines, I guess you could say, and just watch people do that sort of stuff. But again, they wanted to have these protests take place on a public stage.
Yeah, they want the attention.
And however, the group's critics say its protests are disrupting people's lives and won't win them any support, which is what we've been basically saying. The critics are people who say things about these protests and probably say bad things about those protests. They say they're disrupting people's lives, which means you're interrupting people from what they want to do. A lot of people may have traveled several hours from Japan or Taiwan to go see the paintings in the museum there, and then somebody's sitting in front of them throwing tomato sauce on them, and you'd probably feel that you've been cheated out of a lifetime opportunity.
Yeah, well, think about it. Maybe some of these travelers have saved for years to go on a very special vacation, and they finally get to go, and they're excited to go and see some very famous pieces of art, and the museum has to shut down, or at least shut down a wing of the museum because these paintings have been damaged. It would be very, very disappointing to some of the people who are on vacation or who just want to see some beautiful art and not have to worry about protesters. So, yeah, hopefully they'll find a better way to protest. I think they would have more people support their cause if they could protest in a better way.
That's right, and it's a lesson for us all. If we want to protest things in the future, we need to find effective ways of doing it, not ways that will attract criticism. So that brings us to the end of our News Watch unit for the month of May. Again, we were talking about flying taxis and a protest group in London there throwing soup on a painting, at least on the glass that was protecting it. So thank you for joining us, and we look forward to working with you again next month. From all of us here at English Digest, my name is Tom.
I'm Stephanie.
Goodbye.
Bye.